Now, the disappearance of Nicola Bulley gripped the nation back in January as Lancashire police and private investigators spent over 3 weeks searching for the missing 45-year-old mother of two after she disappeared on a dog walk alongside the River Wyre.
We're never ever going to lose the hope, of course we're not. But right now, it is as though she has vanished into thin air.
As soon as she was reported missing, following the information that was provided to the police by her partner Paul, and based on a number of specific vulnerabilities that we were made aware of, Nicola was graded as high risk.
Now, Lancashire police came under fire for revealing deeply personal details about Nicola to the public, including her, quote, significant issues with alcohol. That was before her body was pulled from the river 23 days after she first disappeared, with an inquest into her death commencing in Preston today. That inquest has heard that Nicola was alive and sober when she entered the water with no evidence to suggest she was harmed before tragically drowning. But the hearing has prompted fresh criticism of the police's handling of the case, with investigative journalist and former police officer Mark Williams-Thomas highlighting contradictions while attending. And I'm delighted to say that Mark joins me now live from Preston. So, Mark, after what you've heard today at the inquest, do Lancashire police still have serious questions to answer over their handling of Nicola Bulley's disappearance?
Good evening, Dan. Yes, they do. I mean, let's be very clear that the inquest is a fact-finding exercise. That the coroner's purpose is to try to establish what happened to Nicola, not to criticise any parties involved. We heard today from the very significant witnesses. In fact, today was probably the most important day. We heard initially from the pathologist, the Home Office pathologist, whose determination was very clear that, as you said, Nikki fell into the water and she subsequently drowned. We then heard some evidence from the police officer in charge of the investigation, Detective Superintendent Smith, who gave an overview in terms of the timeline of what they believe Nicola was up to. But then we heard some very significant evidence, firstly from the police diver. This is a police diver who went into the water and carried out what he considered to be some kind of test to see whether or not a body could float. Now, of course, he wasn't dead. There wasn't a test that was exactly the same situational conditions of Nicola. But what he said is that he believed she went in by the water, by the bench, and travelled downstream, pushed by the water to a position where her body eventually ended up being rescued. But the problem was contrary to that is the next three witnesses who gave their evidence, which was firstly initially two doctors, eminent doctors, who basically gave their view that the point to which Nikki went into the water, she would have been dead within a matter of seconds, and that's because of the shock from the water. And then we heard experts gave evidence who said that actually the point to which you go in a water, you and you're dead, you will sink. So it poses the question, if she went into the water at the bench and she died immediately and you sink, and we know that because evidence tells us that, how did she then travel some distance, round bends, past snagging on the ground and eventually over a weir to come to rest about 2 miles downstream? Doesn't quite add up.
No, absolutely intriguing. Also intriguing today, Mark, was the revelation that there was no alcohol in Nicola's body. And surely that does mean the police are going to struggle with their botched PR handling of this case, because you'll remember there was outrage over the fact that they publicly revealed Nicola's issues in the past with alcohol. Well, it doesn't seem to have played any part in her disappearance, Mark. So surely that adds weight to the critics of the police, who said that that was being used almost as a diversionary tactic to take the focus off their botched handling of her disappearance.
Yeah, they made some major errors in terms of their PR handling. And I was very critical at the time, and I remain critical of Lancashire Police, who got it absolutely wrong. You know, they should have come out and apologised for doing what they did. They put it out there that Nikki was suffering from dependency on alcohol as a result of her menopause situation. We now know very clearly that the point at which she went into the water, there was no consumption of alcohol, there was no consumption of drugs. But I read in the meantime numerous people on social media who were saying she turned up drunk in the morning, she took the kids to school drunk. That was quite simply as a result of the police putting out there that that she was drinking. So very disappointing, really. And I think that the Lancashire police should hold their head in shame, certainly in relation to that aspect. They got that completely wrong. They should never have released that information. I have been critical of the police. Let's be very clear. We do now know some answers for the family. We know that she died as a result of drowning. We know that the time of which she died is most probably after 9:18, but before 9:30. So that was around the time that we died, and most probably at a point of 9:22, which was when there was a spike on her Fitbit. So we know that with certain certainty, and you can't change that because those are fixed data pieces of information.
Mark, an incredibly difficult day for Nicola's family and friends. I believe her husband was at the inquest today. Is that right? And how were they coping?
Yeah, Paul was in the gallery whilst he was there listening to everything, as was Nikki's sister and family and parents. They suffered, over the past months in a way that none of us will be able to understand unless they've been through it. And they suffered again today. They were visibly disturbed when some of the detail came out.